Why you keep attracting the wrong people. Carl Jung's Hidden Psychology. Part 1. IT is not bad luck. IT is a pattern. Have you ever looked at your love life and thought, why does this keep happening to me? Different person, same emotional story. At first, everything feels exciting. You feel seen, wanted, understood. But somewhere along the way, it shifts. The emotional distance begins. The confusion starts. The consistency disappears. And you find yourself back in the same emotional place you swore you would never return to. And after a while, a quiet belief starts forming inside you. Maybe I just have bad luck in love. But what if it is not luck at all? What if it is pattern recognition? Just not the kind you are conscious of. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, believed something very powerful. He said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Let that sink in. Because, according to Jung, we don't just choose partners randomly. We are often drawn to people who reflect something inside us. Not always something healthy, but something familiar. And familiarity is one of the most powerful forces in human relationships. Even more powerful than logic. Even more powerful than self-respect in moments of emotional vulnerability. This is why someone can know a relationship is wrong, but still feel deeply attached to it. Because the nervous system doesn't always respond to what is healthy. It responds to what it recognizes. And what it recognizes is often shaped long before adulthood. Jung believed that much of our emotional life is influenced by what he called the unconscious mind, a part of us that stores memories, emotional imprints, childhood experiences, and unresolved wounds. And this unconscious mind quietly builds a blueprint for love. Not a blueprint you consciously chose, but one you learned through experience. So if love in your past was inconsistent, you may find yourself drawn to inconsistency. If love required effort, chasing, or proving your worth, you may unconsciously feel pulled toward people you have to earn. If love felt emotionally unavailable, you may find emotionally unavailable people strangely attractive. Not because you want pain, but because your nervous system confuses familiarity with safety. And this is where the cycle begins. You meet someone new. At first, there is chemistry, a spark, a sense of possibility. But often, that spark is not just attraction. It is recognition. Your unconscious saying, this feels familiar, but familiar does not always mean healthy. And this is where many people get trapped in the same emotional loop. Because when something feels intense, we assume it is meaningful. But intensity is not always love. Sometimes intensity is anxiety. Sometimes it is uncertainty. Sometimes it is your nervous system reacting to emotional unpredictability. Carl Jung would say that until you become aware of these hidden patterns, you are not truly choosing your relationships. You are repeating them. And the painful part is this. You are not repeating them with the same person, but with the same emotional energy. Different face, same dynamic. Different story, same emotional ending. But here is the important truth that changes everything. If a pattern can be learned, it can also be unlearned. But it starts with awareness, because you cannot change what you cannot see. And most people never pause long enough to ask the deeper question: why am I attracted to this type of person specifically? Not just, why did it fail? But why did it feel right in the beginning? Because the beginning often reveals the pattern, not the ending. And once you start seeing this clearly, something begins to shift inside you. You stop blaming luck. You stop blaming timing. And you start looking inward, not with shame, but with curiosity. Because Carl Jung believed that every repeated emotional pattern is not just a problem. It is a message from the unconscious asking to be understood. And until you understand it, it will keep showing up in your relationships. Now, before we go deeper into why this happens and how it forms inside you, if you are watching this and something inside you is already connecting the dots, don't ignore that feeling, because awareness is the beginning of change. And if you want more videos like this, where we break down love, psychology, and emotional patterns through the lens of Carl Jung, take a second and subscribe to the Love and Relationship Lab, because what we are going to uncover next might completely change how you see your relationships. Part 2. The Unconscious Blueprint of Love. Before we continue, do me a favor. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. It really helps us grow the channel. And in return, I will continue doing deeper research and bringing you more content like this on love, psychology, and relationships through the lens of Carl Jung. Thank you. Now, let's continue. Carl Jung believed something most people never fully consider. You are not just attracted to people consciously. You are also guided by something beneath awareness, your unconscious mind. And this unconscious mind doesn't think in logic. It thinks in patterns. Emotional patterns. Familiar patterns. Repetitive patterns. This is what creates what we can call an unconscious blueprint for love. A hidden map inside you that quietly influences who feels right and who doesn't. But here is the surprising part. This blueprint is not created by what you want. It is created by what you experienced, especially in your early emotional life, your childhood relationships, your early attachments, your first experiences of being loved or not being fully loved. These experiences don't just stay in memory. They become emotional expectations. So, later in life, when you meet someone new, your unconscious is not asking, "Is this healthy for me?" It is asking, "Does this feel familiar?" And familiarity can be misleading, because if your early emotional environment was unstable, inconsistent, or unpredictable, then stability in adulthood might feel strange, even uncomfortable, even boring. And this is where many people unknowingly sabotage healthy relationships, not because they don't want love, but because calm love feels unfamiliar to their nervous system. Carl Jung would say that the psyche always tries to complete unfinished emotional experiences. So if you grew up feeling unseen, you may unconsciously be drawn to people you have to fight to be seen by. If love once felt conditional, you may find yourself trying to earn love in adult relationships. If affection was inconsistent, you may feel strangely attached to emotionally unavailable people, not because you want suffering, but because your inner world is still trying to resolve an old emotional story. And until that story is made conscious, you will keep replaying it with different people. This is why someone can say, "I always attract emotionally unavailable partners." But the deeper truth is often, the emotionally unavailable pattern feels familiar to my unconscious. Jung would argue that attraction is not just about chemistry, it is about recognition. Something inside you recognizes something inside them, and that recognition can be based on emotional wounds, not just compatibility. This is also why many people feel a strong initial spark with the wrong person, because the spark is not always love. Sometimes it is activation, your nervous system reacting to unpredictability, your emotions responding to emotional uncertainty, and your mind interpreting that intensity as connection. But real connection is often quieter, more stable, more grounded, less chaotic. But if you are used to emotional intensity, stability can feel like absence. And this creates confusion in modern relationships, because many people are chasing intensity while unknowingly avoiding peace. Carl Jung believed that becoming conscious of these patterns is the beginning of psychological freedom. Because once you see the blueprint, you are no longer controlled by it. You can pause. You can reflect. You can choose differently. You can ask, is this attraction coming from alignment or from familiarity? And that question alone can change your entire relationship life, because it creates space between feeling and action. And in that space, awareness grows. But there is another layer, even deeper than this unconscious blueprint. A part of you that doesn't just repeat patterns, but also hides parts of yourself from love. And Jung called this the shadow. And understanding this shadow is where everything starts to change. But before we go there, remember this. You are not broken. You are patterned. And patterns can be understood. And once understood, they can be transformed. Part 3. The shadow and the love you think you deserve. Now, let's go deeper. Carl Jung introduced one of the most important ideas in psychology, the shadow. And if the unconscious blueprint explains who you are attracted to, the shadow explains what you tolerate. The shadow is the part of you that contains everything you do not fully accept about yourself, your insecurities, your fears, your emotional needs, your jealousy, your need for reassurance, your fear of being abandoned, and even your deepest desire to be chosen and loved fully. Most people think relationship problems come from the other person. But Jung would say something more uncomfortable. Many relationship patterns begin with how you relate to yourself. Because when parts of you are rejected internally, you often accept the same rejection externally. Not consciously, but quietly, emotionally. For example, if deep inside you feel, "I am not enough," you may stay longer than you should in relationships where you are not truly valued. If a part of you fears being alone, You may tolerate inconsistency just to avoid abandonment. If you believe love must be earned, you may keep proving your worth to people who never fully meet you halfway. And over time, this creates a painful cycle. You meet someone. You ignore early warning signs. You explain away red flags. You adjust your boundaries. And slowly, without realizing it, you abandon yourself in the relationship, not all at once, but in small emotional compromises. And Jung would say this is not random. It is the shadow at work, because the shadow does not just contain what you reject, it also influences what you allow. And here is the deeper truth. You teach people how to treat you based on what you believe you deserve. If you believe you deserve inconsistency, you will tolerate inconsistency. If you believe love must be fought for, you will end up in relationships that feel like emotional battles. If you believe you are almost enough, but not fully worthy, you will attract relationships that keep you in a state of almost chosen. Not fully in, not fully out, just in between. And that in-between feeling creates emotional addiction, because the mind starts chasing resolution, chasing clarity, chasing consistency from someone who is not providing it. But Jung would argue that this is not just about the other person. It is about what is unintegrated within you, because the shadow always seeks expression. And if it is not understood internally, it will appear externally, in relationships, in patterns, in repeated emotional pain. But here is where transformation begins. The moment you start noticing, I keep accepting less than I want. That is not weakness. That is awareness beginning. Because awareness creates distance, and distance creates choice. And choice is where change becomes possible. When you begin to see your patterns clearly, something powerful happens. You stop confusing attachment with love. You stop confusing anxiety with connection. You stop confusing potential with reality. And you begin to see people for who they actually are, not who you hope they will become. Carl Jung believed that true psychological growth happens when we integrate the shadow, not when we deny it. Integration means you no longer let hidden fears control your decisions. You acknowledge them. You understand them. But you do not let them lead your life anymore. And as this happens, something shifts in your relationships. You become more selective, not out of fear, but out of clarity. You become more grounded, not because you closed your heart, but because you opened your awareness. And you begin to realize something very important. The wrong people were never the real problem. They were revealing where you had not yet fully chosen yourself. And once you start choosing yourself, the patterns begin to break. Not overnight, but clearly, slowly, powerfully. Part 4. How the pattern breaks and real love begins. Now let's conclude this. At this point, one question remains. If these patterns are so deeply rooted, how do they actually change? Carl Jung's answer would not be simple, but it would be clear. Change begins with conscious awareness combined with responsibility, not blame, not guilt. Awareness. Because once you can see the pattern, you are no longer fully inside it. You become someone who can observe it, and that observation creates a gap between impulse and action. And in that gap, freedom begins. Most people think the solution is to find better people. But Jung would argue the deeper truth is this: you don't first attract better people. You become someone who can recognize them. Because when your internal patterns are still active, even a healthy person can feel unfamiliar. An unfamiliar can feel wrong. So people often repeat cycles not because they lack opportunities for better love, but because they cannot yet emotionally recognize it. This is why healing is not just about understanding relationships. It is about changing your internal reference point for love. And that happens in a very practical way. You start noticing your automatic reactions. You begin to question emotional intensity. You slow down your decisions. You stop ignoring discomfort. And most importantly, you stop abandoning yourself just to keep someone else close. Because every time you abandon yourself in a relationship, you reinforce the old pattern. But every time you choose yourself, even in small moments, you weaken it. This is how transformation actually happens. Not in one dramatic moment, but in repeated conscious choices. Carl Jung called this process individuation, becoming a whole, integrated version of yourself. And as you become more whole, something interesting happens in your relationships. You stop chasing connection from a place of lack. You start choosing connection from a place of clarity. You no longer confuse emotional chaos with passion. You no longer confuse anxiety with love. You no longer confuse potential with reality. And slowly, your relationships begin to change, not because the world suddenly changes, but because you do. The same patterns that once pulled you in begin to lose their grip. And what once felt magnetic no longer has control over you, because you are no longer the same person who used to respond to it. And that is the real shift Jung was pointing toward. Not perfection, not finding the perfect partner, but becoming aware enough to stop repeating unconscious cycles. So, if you take anything from this video, take this. You are not destined to keep repeating the same wrong relationships. You are only repeating what you have not yet fully understood. And once you understand it, you can finally change it. If this video of why we attract wrong people resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who is stuck in the same relationship patterns. Subscribe to the Love and Relationship Lab for more videos like this, and leave a comment below. What resonated with you? What pattern are you finally ready to break? Because awareness is where change begins. But sharing, reflecting, and engaging is how that change starts and grows. Thank you for being part of the Love and Relationship Lab. Thank you for the support. See you in the next video.